Thank you, Times Lit Festival, for inviting us. And certainly it's for me a privilege to have this kind of a panel where, the great stalwarts here, all of them are very big names in the Indian literature or global literature. Nemade Saab, Perumal Murugan, Borah Saab here. So we are like, Meera is here. Chalapathy's work is quite significant in terms of understanding how, translation or literary translation is carried out. I come from the background of poetics, and here is my task to deal with novelists of great stature and reputation. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to open up this idea of India is a land of translation, right? We are translating all the time. And if you look at this city, Bombay, Mumbai is a city. Perhaps, I came from outside and now I'm based in Mumbai. I first time saw Mumbai speaking in million tongues almost, million tongues, various languages. In fact, in terms of the city experience, Mumbai, is speaking to Bombay, the past, right. So my first, opening, we are, Nemade Sahib is here, Perumal Murugan, Meera, and Borah Sahib is here. So what I want to ask as a general question, the first question is, what is translation? How do we look at translation? Does it mean that we are actually, literally, transferring from word to word to a language which is not our original language or native language, I'm beginning with Nemade Saab's own work on Deshuvad or nativism, and I would like my fellow panelists to respond to that idea, that how do we root translation into our own traditions, aesthetic tradition, poetic traditions. To what extent, we all read Shakespeare. When are we going to read Kalidas? When are we going to read Kumar Sambhav? We have millions tongues and, gossiping and quarreling over our linguistic identity. But how do we, get to that point where, as A.K. Ramanujan used to say, that only a poet can translate another poet. So how do we translate, Or we in the process, what in linguistic philosophy called transcreate, So from Tamil to English, or Tamil to Malayalam, or Tamil to Marathi, how do we look at translation, What is this idea of translation, something like idea of India? What is this, Nemade Sahib, to begin with.
Friends, lest I forget, let me thank the organizers. I am very grateful to the organizers to
keep it here.
Have this opportunity to have some dialogue with you and my friends.
Please, sir.
The question that is asked to me and to all of us would be, how do we translate and why do we translate? I think why is more important because the answer is very short. Writing is more than any other art a political act. And all translations, I think, are related to this politics of language. I am talking in the good sense what politics is, not in the usual sense that we talk about. If we translate something into our own language, we obviously make our language richer because there is more content, more characters. Don Quixote is not possible anywhere in India. But if you translate Don Quixote, Cervantes, you get so many characters, such a good fun, and the whole attitude to life, which is not possible for ages in a country like India. So this is what translation gives us, because Don Quixote teaches us how to look at the world from a tangential point of view, from a more intelligent point of view, by looking yourself stupid. No, this is the advantage that you get from this point of view. And the most important thing here is that we normally should actually translate into our own language. There are, I should again use the term Quixotic, there are Quixotic translators who translate their works into another language, which is really very Quixotic. So this is the, immediately I give you the example of how I learned things from Cervantes. The word Quixotic comes to Marathi because of this. You know, it is not possible to translate your work, the work from your language into a foreign language, because a foreign language, whatever it says, linguists have classified languages. You have a mother tongue, you have a first language, second language, third language, and so on. And you are very ignorant in a foreign language. This has been the general conclusion. You are always well versed in your own language. Even if when you are not educated, even if you are a shepherd or a farmer or a beggar, you are good in your own language. But if you do something like Naipaul and Salman Rushdie, you expose your ignorance to your own people. This is the what you call general error that all of us have been doing for all these days. Instead of translating other writers into our own language, we translate our works outside in order to become international. There is nothing like international, I tell you. There is nothing like universal. In literature, we don't believe in universal systems. There are only indigenous systems, native systems. There is only Shakespeare, Dante, Homer, all are indigenous writers, Deshi writers. There is no international writer possible, and there are many great writers whom we do not know, but they are equally great. And there will be a long list of great writers you do not know. And if Dostoevsky has not been translated, probably you wouldn't know how great a novelist could be. Anyway, the question is, translating into your mother tongue is a political act, and it has to be encouraged, and that is the only solution to the great poverty that we face. In India, you get a great poverty of attitudes, approaches, looking at things, glorifying history, being xenophobic and chauvinistic. All these degenerate activities could be cured by good translations into your languages. This is my opinion about translation.
So this sounds like, we are going back to this idea that when we are translating, and as your own work over time, like your iconic work, Kosala, and also recently of late, Hindu, a very powerful reminder of our own traditions, as opposed to the Western tradition where the art of translation lies in terms of being faithful to original. When we come back to our literary traditions and look at, how Kalidas and others have been, in our imagination, so we are very, very, what is called in linguistics again, is indexical, symbolic, and context sensitive. It means that when we are translating from the so-called original, say Marathi, Bangla, or Malayalam, and when we put into another language, the context changes, So indexial structure changes. So I'm going to go back to two of the great writers from Malayalam and Tamil. And this is like on the fun side, making you aware of the little funny part in translation. I live almost a life of translator. Forever I'm migrating across languages and translating myself. If you look at God of small things, and we discussed before, this conference also. So when the ending of the novel comes, there is a term I'm told that both in Tamil and Malayalam, tomorrow means nale. So the nale is there, She writes tomorrow and then nale. So there is an English word tomorrow and then, you put on to this nale. I'm told that I have spent little childhood with Vanishwanath Renuji. So Renu, when he wrote his Parti Parikarapata, so he provided a glossary of, regional language. He was not actually writing in Hindi. That's what the publisher told him, that you are not writing in Hindi. So provide a glossary. So coming back to this idea, from Tamil and Malayalam, to what extent you remain Desi, even when you are, translating, English is also now becoming a Desi language. So is it possible that we can play around, the language of translation and also the original language, Is it possible, Perumal and Meera, both of you, because tomorrow means Nala in both language, So I looked at your own works, recently of late, after you, came out of your hibernation and you took a new avatar, new life, and Meera, your own work. So what is it, To what extent we can remain, as Nemade Sahib is saying, Desi, that indigenous root, What is it, So can we use, where different, linguistic place takes place? Tomorrow, Nale. Yeah, both of you. Acha, Meera first. Yeah, we have an interpreter for Murugan ji, so please bear with us.
First of all,
it's a translation happening. Sorry, Meera.
Thank you, Times, for conducting such a meaningful discussion on translation, because that is one topic which we need to discuss a lot more. Is it audible?
Yeah, audible. At the back, yeah.
Yes, thank you. But I think it's so sad that even after 70 years of independence, we are still discussing the same topic. How much is missing in translation? How much we read Shakespeare more compared to our own Indian writers. Isn't it sad and depressing? And that too happens at a time when all our political parties are bragging about nationalism and patriotism. What right do we have to talk about patriotism when we haven't paid attention to enriching our own regional languages? Because without regional languages, there is no India. There is no India, there is no nation without our regional experiences. So I find it quite depressing that we are still discussing on how much we are missing in translation, how much our regional writers are being obscured in the global scene and even in the Indian scene. And we read more Shakespeare compared to our own writers. And our topic is about missing Kalidasa. I don't think in the present scenario, Kalidasa is easy to be translated because he has written many things. No? For example, translating Shyamala Dandakam could be very dangerous. In Shyamala Dandakam, Kalidasan has described the goddess as someone who is chewing pan and all. So, it's for one thing, it is better that it's not being translated that much. But even coming to the topic, the question you asked, my translator, I have 2-3 translators who have done my translations. My translator, who is Dr. J. Devika, she is of the opinion that she should leave some traces of regional experiences or regional flavor in the translation, so that the book should be read by the reader, knowing that it is a translated work. But another translator, who is Rajesh Rajamohan, he has translated one of my short novellas, Gospel of Judas. He is of the opinion that this book should be read as an English book. You shouldn't let the reader know in which language it is written, because the book in English is a book of it on its own. So there are these different views, but personally, I think the regional experiences should be there. The flora, the fauna, the nature, everything should be there. Then only you will read the book as a unique one.
Lovely. So, please, going back to again Nale, Murugan sir.
வணக்கம். டிரான்ஸ்லேஷனுக்கு ஒரு மரபான ஒரு வரையறை அப்படிங்கிறது தமிழில் தொல்காப்பியம்ங்கிற இலக்கண நூல்லையே ஒரு 2000 வருஷத்துக்கு முன்னாடியான ஒரு இலக்கண நூல்லையே சொல்லியிருக்காங்க. அதில் பார்த்திங்கன்னா மொழிபெயர்த்து அதற்பட யாத்தல் அப்படின்னு சொல்லுவாங்க. அதில் ஒரு மொழியிலிருந்து இன்னொரு மொழிக்கு போகிறதுங்கிறது சரி, அதுக்கு மேலே அவங்க யாத்தல்ங்கிறதுல என்ன சொல்கிறாங்கன்னா அது ஒரு கிரியேட்டிவ் ஒர்க்கு அப்படிங்கிற ஒரு சென்ஸில் ஒரு தொல்காப்பியர் சொல்கிறாரு. அது மட்டும் இல்லாமல் டிரான்ஸ்லேஷனில் எப்படி பெயர் சொற்கள் அது எப்படி மாறும், அதை எப்படி ஒரு மொழியிலிருந்து இன்னொரு மொழிக்கு கொண்டு போகும்போது அந்த டார்கெட் லாங்குவேஜுடைய அதனுடைய தன்மைக்கு ஏற்ற மாதிரி எப்படி பெயர் சொற்களை பயன்படுத்துறது அப்படின்னும் அவர் பேசியிருக்காரு. இப்போ ஆக்சுவலாக அது சான்ஸ்கிரிட்டிலிருந்து தமிழுக்கு வரும்போது என்ன மாதிரி ராமன் அப்படின்னா ராமன் முன்னாடி சேர்க்குற மாதிரியான ஒரு உச்சரிப்போடு அவர் சொல்கிறார். இப்போ அஸ்வினிகுமார் கேட்குறதுக்கு கூட அந்த மாதிரி ஒரு லாங்குவேஜை தாய்மொழியாக கொண்டிருக்கிறவங்க இன்னொன்று கொண்டு போகிறதோ, அவங்க எழுதும் போதோ அல்லது டிரான்ஸ்லேட் பண்ணும்போதோ ரெண்டு லாங்குவேஜ் வார்த்தையும் எப்படி பயன்படுத்தலாம் அப்படின்னு கேட்குறாரு. அது
before I translate Perumal Murugan's comments, I just want to preface it by saying that this is a studio floor and I am doing a dual role. I am going to be his translator and also I think Ashwani will permit me to speak my own views. First let me translate the first few comments of Perumal Murugan. Murugan points out that in the 2000-year-old Tamil grammar called Tulgapiyam, there is a sutra which talks about translation, and I think Harish Trivedi actually mentions that probably Tamil is the first language to have a specific technical term to refer to translation. So the term yatal which comes in that particular sutra, which is a very, very aphoristic kind of sutra, is that it is a creative process, and he also talks about how proper names should be translated into Tamil. This is a very interesting concept because our modern concept would be that you can't dab a change or tamper with proper names. The example that Perumal Murugan gave was, how do you write Sanskrit names into Tamil? For instance, Ram in Hindi or Sanskrit would be translated or written in Tamil as Iraman. Bhim would be written as Veeman. Lakshman would be written as Ilakkuvan.
அது மாதிரி இப்போ என்னுடைய நாவல் கவிதையெல்லாம் டிரான்ஸ்லேட் பண்ணும்போது சில இடங்களில் தமிழ் சொல்ல அப்படியே யூஸ் பண்ணி டிரான்ஸ்லேட்டர் பயன்படுத்துகிறாங்க. இப்போ என்னுடைய கவிதை சாங்ஸ் ஆஃப் அ கவார்டுன்னு ஒன்று பெங்குயின் வெளியீட்டில் வந்திருக்கு. அதில் பார்த்தீங்கன்னா ஒரு கவிதையில் அப்புச்சி அப்படிங்கிற ஒரு சொல்ல டிரான்ஸ்லேட்டர் அப்படியே யூஸ் பண்ணியிருக்காரு. இப்போ அப்புச்சி அப்படின்னு சொல்கிறது அம்மாவுடைய அப்பா, அதுக்கு தமிழில் இருக்கக்கூடிய சொல்லு. இந்த மாதிரி ஒரு ரிலேஷன் சம்மந்தப்பட்ட சொற்களில் நிறைய சொற்களை அந்த கவிதையை அடுக்கி கொண்டே வரும். அப்படி வரும்போது அந்த இடத்துல அந்த தமிழ் சொல்ல அப்படியே அவர் பயன்படுத்துகிறார். அப்போ ரீடர்ஸுக்கு அது ஒரு பெரிய கஷ்டம்னு நான் நினைக்கல. எப்படின்னு சொன்னால் அதில் வரும்போது தொடக்கத்தில் வரும்போதெல்லாம் ஒரு உறவு பெயரை இங்கிலீஷில் டிரான்ஸ்லேஷன் பண்ணுறாரு. அப்படியே தொடர்ந்து வரும்போது தமிழ் சொல்லையே போடும்போது இப்போ படிக்கக்கூடிய ரீடருக்கு அது இது ஒரு உறவு பெயர் அப்படிங்கிற அந்த புரிதல் கிடைச்சிரும். ஆக அந்த இன்னொன்று என்ன அப்படின்னு சொன்னால் இது மூலம் தமிழ் அப்படிங்கிற அந்த உணர்வும் வரும். இது ரெண்டுமே இந்த மாதிரி ரெண்டு மொழி சொல்லையும் பயன்படுத்தும் போது கிடைக்கக்கூடிய ஒரு பெனிஃபிட்னு நினைக்கிறேன்.
So next he moves on to talk about the translation of his poems, published as the Covered's poems. There, in one particular poem, he gives a list of various Tamil kinship terms, and the translator of the poem, while employing a number of English equivalents, suddenly introduces one particular Tamil kinship term called Appachi, which is the paternal, which is the Appachi, yeah, Amma, okay. Amma Appachi, the mother of the father. So to indicate that the same term has been used, and Perumal Murugan believes that this actually enriches the experience of the reader, because the reader can make out that it is a kinship term because in the context, it also gives a flavor and a color, and which actually is an enriching experience.
So I think now you look at how we are going back to this idea of translation with very indigenous, a strong I use the term Desi. Of late, when I was writing something about Arun Kolatkar and the famous poem, I mean, like Mumbaikas might know about it, Arun Kolatkar's famous poem, Pie Dog. And then I wrote about, rather than using dog, I said in English, kutta. It's a little jarring, but, I'm kind of giving dignity to that linguistic play. So here is this, entity acquires a new life, a new poetic life. So moving from Mumbai to Assam, Guwahati, Dhrubajyoti Barua is here. He's a man of the moment currently. His new novel, Azar, I don't know how many of us have heard about it. I have some remote connection to Assam, so I hear about it from my Baido in Assam, that Azar is about black fever. And I don't know exactly whether it's Kala Jwar, so he will, Kala Jwar. So you can see that how translation is automatically happening, amongst us. So I'm going to ask the man of the moment here to speak of his own relationship with his native language and also translation, And how would he like to see his own work being translated in other languages, Indian languages? Most welcome.
Thank you, Ashwani. Am I audible? Yeah. So, the title of today's discussion is basically why Shakespeare and not Kalidas. Until now, we have been using the name Shakespeare and Kalidas as metaphors.
Certainly it's a metaphor. Yeah, certainly metaphor. Yeah.
But beyond metaphor, the thing has to be also examined to get a very proper perspective of the problem or of the issues. Now, wherever the Britishers went, they dragged the poor bard from Stratford-on-Avon all over the world. Shakespeare has been dragged to Mumbai, to the dusty plains of central India, to the cow belt, and even to the remotest corners of Northeast, where in my textbooks, we had to read 3 pieces: Julius Caesar, Tempest, and another piece, Merchant of Venice. You can choose any of these 3. In school, I'm not speaking about BA honors in English. Now, what is this? Shakespeare has been the cultural face of British colonialism. And it was used as such not only in India, but all over the world. And at the same time, it was used to suppress the likes of Kalidas, Bhavabhuti, or others. The colonialism does not want that there should be equal or even better novels or dramas or poetry in the colonial areas. They want to impose Kalidasa, and they have successfully imposed Kalidasa, and they have made us cultured slaves, and we are still slaving under those notions. And let us come to the second point. What Shakespeare wrote about and what Kalidasa wrote about? They're dramas. They're essentially meant to be performed and not read.
True.
And Kalidasa was not performed. And all over India, except for certain northeastern regions, these southern languages and the northern languages all know Sanskrit. And it would have been comprehensible to understand and enjoy Kalidasa even now in Sanskrit original. But we are not doing it. We are not doing it. So these aspects of translation and original, the need of the hour, the political requirement, the cultural political requirements also have to be kept in mind while translating, especially foreign works. In our own case, we have to translate freely from one Indian language to the another, so that we can meet India.
What do you mean by freely? I mean, like, what do you mean? You anticipate a conflict amongst languages or across languages? I'm kind of,
Amongst
opening
languages,
up this debate also.
Amongst languages, no, but across languages may be in certain expressions that you have so finely brought out in some cases. But those are minor things.
Yeah.
We do not know. We do not know each other, and only way of knowing each other is through our literature, and that through translation. Now, to know from Tamil or know Marathi, I have to take help of English. That is the shame. Now that we have to try to address in the days to come.
So what I'm trying to put across here, if you look at our traditions, especially I'm told the first Ramayana version was made available in Assamese,
We say it is second.
Second, maybe second.
Ramayana
I stand
version in
corrected.
regional-
Second, Indian language.
Indian language,
Indian
was
language.
written in Assamese
Yeah,
by Madhava Kandali.
yeah.
And it was a very beautiful, very exhaustive work, and it has been brought to the attention of the Ramayana circuit and also the scholars
Yeah.
by none other than Indira Goswami
Ji, Mamu,
in
yeah,
her
yeah.
seminal doctoral work and the subsequent book that subsequently followed.
Ji.
Now, it has got certain local variations. Certain local variations that is not there in Tulsi Ramayan or any of the major Ramayanas. For example, that Manthara
Ji.
was shown there as someone who is smitten with Bharat, likes Bharat, like that. And there are other such small variations. And interesting, even in Tibeto-Burman languages, in a tribal language, in the Karbi language, which is spoken by barely 5 lakh people, spoken, written very less, even less than 50,000. They do have their own Ramayana, Shabin Alun.
Ji, ji.
Namare Sahab knows because he has been there. I've taken
Yeah.
him there.
So what it seems like we have a strong indigenous culture of storytelling and retelling. So does translation become retelling? Because if you look at the experience of Ramayana, there are multiple versions available in our local traditions, traditions of language, like Munda Ramayana. So I don't think that we require English, My apology that I'm a bilingual and I'm writing in English as well. Perhaps, but we have this tradition where we don't require English as mediating language, I think if you look at the story, the essence of the story, whether it's in a Marathi or in Telugu or in Tamil or in Malayalam or in Assamese, I think that is where the ingenuity and the creativity of translator comes into play. I mean, like, that's the question, next question I'm asking, my friend Chalapathy, whose pioneering work on Tamil print culture is instructive, that to what extent a translator become creative, in the sense that he's kind of deviating from original, but it still remains honest to the essence of that story. So the Avigan Sukha Sakuntalam, Meghadutam, whether when they come to Marathi or come to Gujarati, they still, that the essence remains the same. But there is a lot of creativity went into the translation, Venkatachalapathy.
from my experience of translating both classical poetry and
You
also
just did Love Stands
Love
Alone,
Stands
you know.
Alone
I
is
was
a-
kind of looking at, this whole...
This is actually done by my friend
and you
mentor,
wrote it, yeah.
and I edited that volume. See, for me, lots of things go missing in translation.
Yeah, that's...
When the concept of translation as well, we are not just talking about translating content, but we are also translating across time.
Yeah.
I think that is something, especially when you
Temporally.
translate classical poetry. You are also translating time. What was written 2000 years ago, how do you actually bring it into contemporary language? And what happens to that when you bring it into contemporary language? If to translate Sangam poetry in the language of Beowulf would be completely, might sound theoretically right, but would completely serve no purpose. So that is something that to me is very important. The question of time.
The
not
time,
just
the temporal
translating,
quality.
Temporal
the
quality.
temporal quality of the
by
translation. Can you give
one
an
example.
instance, the temporal nature, so that we all benefit from your...
Okay, I'll give you
experience.
an example. So I will draw not from my translation or Tangapa's translation, but A.K. Ramanujan's translation.
A.K. is the great.
So he translates this great poem from 2000 years ago. Talks about, your mother and my mother are unknown to each other. Your father and my father have not a trace of kinship between them. As for you and me, we never met before, and yet, like the mingling of the raindrops with the red earth, our hearts have united, So in A.K., this is not exactly A.K. Ramanujan's translation, which incidentally, this is the title that Vikram Chandra borrows, Red Earth and Pouring Rain.
Yeah.
Now, it has become a title for a novel, and at the same time, this is one of the poems which was put up on the London Underground. So a poem written 2000 years ago in the deep south of India gets translated by an Indian in an American university, and it gets plastered on the walls of the London Underground. So you can see these complex, I can add other things, first published by an American university press and later picked up by a trade publisher from London. And we are discussing all this in the city of Mumbai. So this is a complex network of translations that take place, and this is what enriches this whole exercise. Perhaps later we can come back to the power of the master language of English.
Yeah,
While it is enriching, it can also be very, very debilitating.
No, I agree that, there is something very mysterious happening in the translation, It's not easy. It's not easy. Translation is not easy. But it's also, way of life. For instance, when A.K. Ramanujam, the great A.K. Ramanujam, discovered his indigenous moorings and roots in Chicago Library, he stumbled upon the great, Sangam poetry in the library, in the section of the library. On the other hand, if you look at Nemade Sahib's own work here, his contribution to Indian language and literature, right here, he didn't have to go far and get displaced in terms of translating his, native tradition into a language. The kind of language, if you look at his Hindu work, is kind of very spoken Marathi. It's not that Marathi very formal. So I would like to know from you that, do you also translate? When you write in Marathi, do you have this sense of translation, or you work with this idea that, I am kind of, native-born Marathi speaker, therefore I do not require to translate, On the other hand, my humble submission to you that I find that there is a subconscious stream of translation operating within your work.
Sir, let me begin with this. I have heard everywhere in India, in all languages, that Kalidas is the Shakespeare of India. This is is almost a proverb. But nobody anywhere, even in England, would say Shakespeare is the Kalidas of India. It will be ridiculous if somebody says this, because who is Kalidas and why should be compared? This is the question of a slave culture responding to a dominant culture, even today. Because the signifiers are important. When you talk of Desi, I am really very proud of having Assam in India, where you have even now 191 separate languages spoken. We have counted them. Nowhere in the world 191 languages are alive in 217. Nowhere in the world. In Alaska, they have eliminated 30 languages, only 2 remain. In North America, including Canada and USA, about 137 languages existed, hardly 37 remain now. In South America, in Australia, eliminating about 200 languages, and hardly, even in the reserved areas, few languages remain. We are not so ashamed of our linguistic situation, because we have retained, even in Marathi, we have retained 42 varieties. The linguistic survey shows we don't eliminate languages. This is the problem of signifiers, and that is what we mean. If you translate, you keep your language alive in your own language. But if you translate into a foreign language, you keep that language alive. This is the question. And that is why we have to revert this trend of using foreign signifiers. Use only Indian. You should use Assam whenever we talk of geodiversity. Because UNESCO recently passed a resolution that environmental diversity is related to cultural diversity, and cultural diversity is related to linguistic diversity. So all languages, whether small or big, must live. Even if you have 200 speakers in Assam, they must live, because that is a sign of our human rights situation. Not only that, it is a sign of how we regard linguistic diversity, cultural diversity, and environmental diversity, because each language looks upon the diversity as a holy thing. Geopiety, as the geographers say, it is a geopiety, that is respect for the soil, which if it is lost, you are rootless and you land the whole humanity into trouble. That's what we have not done so far. I am very proud of this.
Jalav, you wanted to respond to this.
If I may actually take forward Professor Nemade's comment. What we find is that, even though Professor Nemade says that by translating into your language, you enrich your language. But by translating outside, you enrich that language. But what happens is that when one translates into English, and I suppose that enriches some other language, the power that the English translator has is not something that the Indian translators have. You translate from, say, if you translate from Malayalam to Tamil, nobody is going to take you seriously. If you translate from Marathi to Kannada, you are not going to be celebrated and invited to a podium like this. The language, it is English that gives that power, and sometimes it can be abused. I'll give you a concrete example. 4 or 5 years ago, Jodi Cruz, this Tamil writer, wrote a novel based on the life of the fishermen of southern Tamil Nadu. He won the Sahitya Academy Award. This novel was to be translated into English and published by Oxford University Press. The translation was complete after 3 years. Just at the time when it should go for editing, this author made some politically unacceptable comments. It is his right to express, whatever views. Immediately the translator said that because of his comments, I am withdrawing the translation. Now, the question is, this became news only because this was the English translator, and the translation is going to be published by OUP. If an Odisha translator had said, I am withdrawing the translation, it would not have caused a single ripple. So the power of English is something that, is greatly harms translation, because it also feeds into the Indian sense of, wanting to be celebrated and respected by the Western world. That is the belief.
But Chalapathy, I just come in here and I would invite my fellow panelists, eminent writers to respond to this. Agree that, English has, kind of hegemony. There is a hegemony certainly. But on the other hand, English is also becoming, like a spoken, a language, Indian language. And on the other hand, if you look at, Perumal Murugan's own work, if his work had not been translated into English, we would not have celebrated his work in this part of the world, right? You need English translation. But, the issue that I would like to ask Murugan when he went into a kind of self-imposed sannyas, and he declared himself dead, and then he took a new birth. So something, and I found, I was in Chennai last week in the festival, and I could gather that Perumal Murugan is all over now, because his voice is not heard only in his Tamil language, but across languages through English. So seems like, the Murugan that who is talking today is reborn with a new language identity. Multiple language identities perhaps, I just want to, open this controversial space of, the hierarchy of English language, the power of English language. But you look at, the other side of the story, that it makes your literature quite powerful. You, please. Yeah.
This is a democratic question ultimately.
Yeah.
If you write in your own language, the question of privacy, Supreme Court has very recently, for months, discussed privacy. So if you write in your own mother tongue, your own language, this great human right of preserving your privacy is maintained. I think if you write in another language and if you circulate even these stories outside, that privacy is disturbed. And then you become a tool in the hands of politicians and then this side and that side. But in Tamil itself, a lot of revolution is possible just because of writing in Tamil. That has been, people have been doing it. And he has done it. He's right in that. So we have to defend his writing in Tamil, not how it is translated into other languages. Also, I would like to add here, apart from this privacy, which gives you a sense of interiority, that you are inside and you are free.
Ji.
If you are in the street, you can't be free, you can't walk this way. Always, Indians are always using even roads as houses, that is different. But the interiority is maintained when you write in your language. You are free, you know where the bathroom is, you know where the books are kept, you know where your slippers are and so on. So that is how every small thing, they say there are about 2 lakh objects in a language stored. All these 2 lakh objects in my language, I know where they are, in the interiority. But if I use English, I would not know even 20 languages. I wouldn't even know what are the different types of shoes, whether ladies' shoes have different words or sandals and like that. So this has to be defended at any cost. And I think he will have also defended. This is not proper to defend writing in your language because it is translated into other languages and become Indian. That is only in a slave country it is possible. That only in English you know each other. It is not possible in, say, other countries like Russia and China and Korea and Japan. They write in their own language and they become national. Only in India you become national when you write in English. It is a tragedy.
It's a tragedy.
So one thing I would like to say.
Please.
I write both in
English
and
Assamese.
also in Assamese. And my English books have been published in novels also. But there is an essential difference. In Assamese, I consider myself as a writer. In English, I consider myself as a storyteller.
This is interesting, quite interesting. So writer to a storytelling.
By writer means I am writing with a cause, a purpose, and also something to achieve. As a storyteller, I am entertaining basically.
So is there any hierarchy, Borah? Is there any hierarchy or is it egalitarian, seamless journey from writer to a storytelling?
It is something that you want to impose. But the reality is that we need English as a bridge. We need English as a bridge and we will keep on needing it for a long, long time to come. Bridge between the Indian people and bridge between the non-Indian people.
I'm quite getting insecure now.
And we will continue to use English. But don't try to justify the using of English. there is an essential difference of outlook in trying to justify, trying to make it also an Indian language and not a language of colonialism. Something different, entirely different. It shows your two values and also it shows your hypocrisy.
So, Perumal, could you just respond? Chalapathy. First, yeah, please.
இங்கிலீஷ்
வருது கேட்குது.
என்னுடைய நாவல் ஒன் பார்ட் இங்கிலீஷில் வந்ததுக்கப்புறம் தான் எனக்கு வந்து
சத்தமாக
ப்ராப்ளம் வந்தது அப்படின்னு ஒரு பேச்சு உண்டு. ப்ராப்ளம் வந்ததுக்கப்புறம் அதை வந்து ரொம்ப வாஸ்ட்டாக பல பேர் படித்து ஒரு ஆதரவு காட்டுறதுக்கும் இங்கிலீஷ் டிரான்ஸ்லேஷன் வந்து உதவுச்சு. வேறு இப்போ வந்து மலையாளத்துலேயோ வேறு இந்திய மொழிகள்லேயோ மட்டும் வந்துருந்துச்சுன்னா அந்த மாதிரி ஒரு வாஸ்டான ரீடர்ஸ்கிட்ட போயிருக்கிறதுக்கான வாய்ப்பு வந்து கிடையாது. அது உண்மை. அது மாதிரி இப்போ சலபதி சொன்னதும் சரி, சார் சொன்னதும் சரி, இப்போ நம்ம இந்திய மொழிகளுக்கு உள்ள டிரான்ஸ்லேஷன் அப்படிங்கிறது வந்து அதிகம் நடக்கிறது இல்லை. அதுக்கு அப்படி செய்கிறதுக்கும் பெரிய மதிப்பு இல்லை. இப்போ நிறைய இப்போ தமிழையே நான் இப்போ பல இடங்களுக்கும் இந்தியாவுக்குள்ளேயே வேறு இடங்களுக்கு போகும்போதும் சரி, வேறு நாடுகளுக்கு போகும்போதும் தமிழ்னு சொல்லும்போது என்ன கேட்குறாங்கன்னா, அது ஒன் ஆஃப் த லோக்கல் லாங்குவேஜ் இன் இந்தியா அப்படிங்கிறாங்க. அப்போ அது மிகப்பெரிய ஒரு எனக்கு உண்மையில் நான் வந்து என்னுடைய மொழியை ஒரு கிளாசிக்கல் லாங்குவேஜ் 2000 ஆண்டுக்கு முன்னாடி இருக்கக்கூடிய லாங்குவேஜ்னு அவ்வளவு பெருமிதமாக சொல்லிட்டு இருக்கேன். அது ஒரு லோக்கல் லாங்குவேஜ், ஒரு டைலாக்ட் மாதிரி வந்து சுருக்கி பார்க்குறது அப்படிங்கிறது இருக்குது பாருங்கள். அது எனக்கு ரொம்ப கஷ்டமாக இருக்குது. அதுக்கு காரணம் முக்கியமாக இந்தியன் லாங்குவேஜஸ்ங்கிற அந்த கான்செப்டு வந்து சரியாக இங்கே வளரல. இந்தியன் லாங்குவேஜஸில் ஒரு லாங்குவேஜுக்கும் இன்னொரு லாங்குவேஜுக்கும் இடையே வந்து உறவுகள் அவ்வளோ கிடையாது. இப்போ நான் வந்து மலையாளத்தை நான் படிச்சுக்கணும், எனக்கு பக்கத்தில் இருக்கக்கூடிய மொழி ஒரு டிரெவிடியன் லாங்குவேஜ், மலையாளத்தை நான் படிச்சுக்கணும் அப்படின்னு சொன்னால் கூட அதுக்கு வந்து தமிழ்நாட்டிலையும் கேரளாலையும் ஒரு ஸ்பேஸ் கிடையாது. அப்படி இருக்குது. இப்போ மலையாளத்தில் இருந்து தமிழ்லேருந்து மலையாளத்துக்கு ஒரு பேசிக்கான ஒரு டிக்ஷனரி கிடையாது. அந்த அளவுக்கு தான் இந்தியன் லாங்குவேஜஸ்க்குள்ளே இருக்கக்கூடிய ரிலேஷன் இருக்குது.
Murugan is responding in two parts. In the first part, he says, there is a theory that, he got into trouble only after his novel got translated into English. But that aside, it is because of the English translation that this enormous groundswell of support that came and, supported him and, saw him through the crisis. So he is very grateful for the English translation. The second part of it is, he's saying that, the status of the Indian languages is very low. And in fact, when he goes abroad, these days he's going abroad quite often, many people outside have no idea about Tamil language. They ask him if it's a dialect or it's a local language, while he is very proud actually that Tamil is a very old language. It's a classical language with a 2000-year-old history. He also points to a very important problem in the Indian linguistic situation. Taking the example of Malayalam, which is just the sister language of Tamil,
Meera is
he
here.
says there is no space, institutional space or other space for a Tamil person to learn Malayalam or Telugu. There is not a proper bilingual dictionary, which is a crying shame.
No, Meera, I'm going to come back to you with this question because A.K. Ramanujam also faced the same dilemma. He didn't cross to Tamil, I mean, like he was very well up on Kannada, Sanskrit, and English, etc., etc. So look at, Malayalam, there is a tradition, Malayalam is a very, very powerful, there is a tradition of translation, at the airport Cochin, you will find all the great world literature being translated in Malayalam language and available there right at the airport. So one question, what's this relationship between Tamil and Malayalam? And secondly, as a woman, so when I looked at your book, Hang Woman, it's so much intensity there in the translation. It seems that, like women, translation is also not property of any particular cultural, heritage. It belongs to everyone. So how would you respond to, as a feminist, this idea that translation belongs to all? It's not property of anyone, one particular language, linguistic tradition, or cultural tradition.
No, it doesn't belong to anyone at all. There is no gender or caste or religious
Little louder.
discrimination.
Little
Can you hear me?
Can you hear the? Is audible?
So, again to quote Devika, she used to say that she became a translator, that is, she translates from Malayalam to English to liberate our women writers from the kind of confinements of our language. She says it's a political process in that way. It's a feminist activity to liberate the women writers of Malayalam into a world language. That's why she translated me, is what she always used to say. And adding to what Sri Perumal Murugan was saying, I completely agree with him, because even though I know a little bit of Tamil, to read his book, I have to depend on the English translation rather than the Tamil book. And if we think about Indian languages, we can easily see that there are equivalents of many words and emotions and even natural things in sister languages rather than in English. In English, we won't find the equivalent terms for many of the emotional experiences we have as an Indian. But in sister languages, we can easily find. Even then, the translation between the sister languages is not happening at all. And we are translating, even if we translate other works into regional languages, we are depending on the English translation as the base and not the original. That's why I said in the beginning that to enrich the Indian languages, there should be some platform to encourage translation between the sister languages. So government should take some action to ensure that sister languages are being enriched by translating into each other. The second thing about women feminist writing, I will come to that.
Particularly that part.
Missing in translation is not only Kalidasa. Missing in translation are the women writers of our country. You hear about Kalidasa. Khana lived at the same time. No. She was the first woman poet of our country, and she lived in the same time, and she also was invited to the Darbar of Vikramaditya, the legends say. But we don't know about her. Her tongue was cut by her husband and her father-in-law. That's how the story goes. And while researching for Arachar or Hangwoman, my book, I came across many Indian writers, women, about whom I haven't ever heard even after reading so much of things. The Therigadas, by the poems by Buddha Bhikshunis. No? We haven't read about them anywhere. So just like the regional languages are kind of wiped off from the scene, women are generally wiped off from the scene by being not translated. That's why I said in my book that history is afraid of women, because you don't find the history of women writers in the history of our literature. And so are the tribal languages. And so are Muslim writers, that is the Muslim women. There have been wonderful writers in the 1930s, and you don't hear about them. You don't read about them at all. So this elimination happens in translation too, which we have to address at this point of time.
Lovely. So I would now invite audience to ask any questions, interact with us, and and see how we could enrich this whole discussion on translation. Please, most welcome. Can you make it?
My name is Siraj Syed. This is to Mr. Nemade. You mentioned that most languages in our country are still alive compared to other countries where a lot of the languages have died. I'd like to point out the fate of one language, and that is Urdu, which is 800 years old, which has given several thousand words to Marathi, to Gujarati, to Bengali and others, which has had writers like Agha Hashar Kashmiri and Mirza Ghalib and 1,000 translations of the world's classics. Unfortunately, in the last 15 to 20 years, all attempts to promote or teach Urdu have come down to zero, almost zero, which is very sad. Why do you think that this one single language is suffering this fate?
Okay. Nemade sir, please.
Urdu is one of our most favorite languages. I should confess that. But the context that you are pointing out, they begin with partition, where not only Urdu but many other languages have suffered. Sindhi, a leading language, has become nil, and there are many dialects, Punjabi and Bengali also, didn't remain the same after partition. So this has to be, connected to some political issues and our stupidity, of going after religion and dividing the country, and we are again going to the same direction. Division of the country is certain if you go in that direction, and speed, when you talk of progress, I think the direction is more important rather than speed and your per capita income and so on. So that per capita income is no longer an indication of your progress. The progress is to be seen in the direction which you go. We are not going in the right direction. So Urdu, I think one of my best writers, Meera, Ghalib, Momin, I would not have been a poet without reading these, But unfortunately, we don't have modern Ghalibs and modern Meers and modern Kurds. And this is also partly the Urdu writers have to be blamed for this. The great old spirit of revolt, they were the greatest enemies of the British in India, The greater sacrifices were done by Muslims in this country. And the whole century is a record of the Muslim, courage against the colonialism. That courage is lost. And now Urdu will be losing the battle all the time. Because half of it is going after religious bigotism, half of it is going after some Saudi Arabian cult which wants every woman to wear, which is not Indian. All these things go on, and that's why I think we don't regard language as a collection of letters and words. Yeah. It is a socio-political issue, it is a socio-linguistic issue, it is a part of culture, it is a part of history, and Urdu is very much Indian, it has no roots outside India. So it is our first duty to preserve Urdu, because in fact, in place of Hindi, Urdu was to become the national language.
Yes, by a casting vote.
Mahatma Gandhi did a lot by calling Hindustani, and the famous
Rajendra Prasad.
Apni boli, mohabbat ki boli. Na Hindi, na Urdu, na Hindustani. This has been the great tradition of the Urdu speaker, which is not found in the modern Urdu writers. The courage of fighting and the self-confidence and the sacrifices to be done on the basis of belonging to the soil. This is not done. That is the reason. Otherwise, Urdu is doing very well.
Will translation help? According to you, will translation help?
Translation is supposed to be the matter of print capitalism.
Yeah.
We can't do much about it. I have some statistics I will be using tomorrow. 90% of the translations in the world, they are from English, German, French, and Russian. And particularly English, 34% works of England come to us. And in return, these 90% of the translation of the world, they come from these 4 languages. Which means their ideas become our ideas. Yeah. And we use the thrown away things from them. Not all of them are readable, but we read them because they are given to us in our arms. We beg arms and we get that kind of thing. This is the question. And in return, the statistic shows we have, say, only 3% translations from all the developing countries, not only India, but Pakistan and Africa and Saudi Arabia and so on. Only 3% from our languages enters Europe, which means they want to know very little of you. Even your revolt and anger will not be known to them, because 3% of it will go, and that will be something like, Niraj Chaudhary like that. Only that will be popular there. Not the proper Premchand or Kabir and Tukaram will not be known there. Shankardev will not be known. This is the tragedy of our people. And this is something which we can't blame them, we have to blame ourselves. So Urdu people have to blame themselves for not taking lead, for not showing courage,
Please.
and not belonging to the soil. This
Thank
is
you.
my
Excuse. Lovely. So let me just respond to what Nemade has just said. See, I mean, translation for him, he writes in Marathi, he's known for his iconic work in Marathi. But do you know that Nemade also enjoys, German music? German music. So give him a big hand for his, this whole cultural, intercultural exchanges, So any translator you meet, I always tell them, translation is something about which, कहते हैं ना, कुछ काम किया, कुछ इश्क किया. So when we do the translation, we do some work, and we also are in love. So translation is like that. Please, most welcome. Yeah. Turn it on. Turn it
Hello.
on. Yeah.
Hello. Yeah. Hello. Yeah, I think I must compliment this panel and the mediator for a wonderful presentation on the translation. And I think I've got only 2 questions on that. I've heard that in the Ramayana written by Valmiki, there is no mention about Lakshman Rekha, while in the Hindi, the Lakshman Rekha comes in. Now, whether it came in because of, like Meera ji was mentioning, to make the woman as a bondage and always be in the Lakshman Rekha, or was it a circumstantial? Number 2, Mr. Murugan said that he got into trouble because of his translation. The translation was done by somebody who did not know the language, or it was intentional? Because both could be possibility. I would like to have the clarification on that.
Meera, you want Meera to respond to that?
I would like
all of us, or
all of whosoever.
but we'll be very quick, I mean, like very quick.
I would like to add something, because it's not easy to encourage translation among the sister languages, because I would say very frankly that some of the languages are very closed and not ready to accept translations from Indian languages, when all the while when they are very ready and offer a warm welcome to translations from English. So this was a very sad set of affairs, no? So in some languages, Malayalam is one language which has enriched itself with translations from all other languages. We have our history dates back to even 50s, when we welcome translations from Russian, English, everywhere. No, all the classic works in other languages were translated and published in our language, and we used to see Bengali writers as our own writers, because we all grew up reading the translations of Bengali novels. Most of the Bengali writers were like our own writers. But you go to Bengali and look for at least one translation from Malayalam, you won't find it.
So please.
I joined the earlier speaker in complimenting the panel. It has been quite a comprehensive discussion and all-encompassing. But I want to go back to the bottom line. And even as you said, and others agreed with you, that you were using Shakespeare and Kalidas as a metaphor. But my question is, still in the context of the phrasing of the discussion around these two, is it really a case of having more of Shakespeare at the popular level, but less of Kalidas at the popular level, and kind of a partisan approach for Sanskrit, maybe? Can you all
I would invite
Borah
to comment on that. Shakespeare and Kalidas, there seems to be. But I just inform you that Shakespeare has been translated into all languages. In all languages.
Certainly.
In Marathi. Yeah. Borah.
As I have already mentioned, from the day the Shakespeare plays were written, they have been continuously being enacted, first in England, and they were carried all over the world, wherever Britishers have gone. But Kalidasa was never continuously played. Even now, only a few days back, I had a talk with the director of the National School of Drama. I asked him, do you have Indian plays in original Sanskrit, which you are able to present to the world? See, we have tried, but we don't have a continuous production. Even in Mumbai, which has been one of the very important part of the
Theatre scene.
movement, I mean, Nataka movement in India, there is also no such thing as Kalidas, Bhavavati or Mitchagatika being played, interpreted, reinterpreted, being played by the top stars of the day. That is not happening. And unless, but that is happening in case of Shakespeare, whether it is in USA, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, or UK itself. Unless that happens, unless we do that to our great place, they will never be equal. They will never be considered equal by anybody, not even by Indians.
So I quickly chip in here. I mean, like, there is a, I was in dialogue with Shyam Benegal. So if you recall Utsav, Mrich Katikam. So we are now, India increasingly moving from translation to transcreation, So look at the paintings, Vasudeva, the great artist in Chennai, made 18 poems based on A.K. Ramanujam's poems, paintings, 18 paintings out of those poems. So once, the whole, Kalidasa issue, if you come to this culture where transcreation is happening across cultures, across language traditions, that will be fantastic stuff. Maybe, all good things come to an end, and I really thank all of my... I will take your last question,
Unfortunately, I don't
Yeah,
think
we have,
Thank you.
organizers. Just I will take the last question, please, ma'am. Please, yeah. A quick question,
So I just wanted to say, like you all said, like in European countries like France or Germany,
Yeah.
The works are written in their languages and they read it in that. They do not require English translations. But in India, there are so many languages, and like a North Indian is not learning Tamil and a South Indian is not learning Hindi, for example.
Question.
But everyone is learning English. So fortunately or unfortunately, English is the common language that is common to all. So the translations are in English. How do we counteract that? We do not have any other common language, and everyone cannot learn every regional language. So there needs to be something to counteract that. Otherwise, this is going to continue.
Can I give you a quick answer? Amish is here. Amish Tripathi is here. And I'm told that, Amish's book is being translated in Assamese also. Chetan Bhagat is already translated in Assamese. So I think, that it's becoming all over. It's going all over. And this is here. Quick, ma'am. Again, quick. I'm sorry, on behalf of the panel, I'm giving quick replies now.
Sir, coming to what he said, like, my name is
Barwa.
Swati Lahoti. I have just written 2 books, both are in Hindi as well as English.
Yes, ma'am.
I have not translated it, I have written it. Sir, what you said about Shakespeare and Kalidas,
Barwa.
I think we need to do something because it has become our culture that we take, we derive a pleasure or dignity or something like in carrying the relics of the Raj. We need to take pride in our own things. If somebody from West tells us that yoga is good, we will follow it. Like Charles Lamb and Mary Lamb, they wrote a book, Tales from Shakespeare. So that so big place, they were concised into a small book. I have read Shakespeare, I have read Kalidas. It's time that our like state government institutes, they compiled or they concised the Kalidasa's place into some small thing. And it is brought to the people. And to add to what he said, Urdu was originally known as Hindustani. It is we Indians who have divided ourselves. Let us not divide ourselves. We need an American scientific channel to tell us that Ram Setu was there.
Ma'am, I really, on behalf of the writers and my fellow panelists, I really ensure you and give you this hopeful message that at least in amongst us, there shall never be another partition, in terms of the language, There shall never be any other partition, Coming back, before I close this, I must leave you with a little, humorous note. My work, Banaras and the Other, is currently being translated in Odia. And I'm going through this, what is called presence of absence, experience of translation. Is being done by a very eminent Odia writer who is almost like mother to me and almost elder sister to me. And one of the words, where the goddess is making love with, in Banaras, you can make love also. You're allowed to do in poetry. And she started asking me that, Ashwani, tell me the meaning of this word, moaning. And on the phone, on the Skype, And I'm really embarrassed, she's like mother to me. And, it's a love making, and mourning is happening, literally, in a sense of phonological sense, I have used that music of, mourning. And then I'm saying, Didi, there are many meanings of mourning. But tell me, I need the meaning to translate into Oriya. See the translation here. And finally, I blurted out, Didi, it's like you are in the pain now. That's the mourning. So friends and audience and my fellow panelists, translation is an art, is a mystical experience of mourning. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you. And the last word I think I will add to her is we will continue using English just like a tool, always remembering that this is a foreign language.